کاوش مدیا.
I'm the last person in the world to sing the praises of the Trump administration's policies towards the Middle East. Almost every case, I would say that they were failures, and in some cases, in my view, a disaster. But there were certain conditions that occurred during that era that I think are important to focus on. Some of them have been addressed in at least tangentially by previous speakers. When the United States renounced and then withdrew from the JCPOA, the Iran nuclear deal, in May of 2018, Iran, for the most part, over the ensuing year, complied with the limits imposed on enrichment of uranium as a result of that deal. And then a year after the U.S. backed away from its commitments under the deal, Iran was convinced that the United States was intent on waging economic warfare on the Islamic Republic, and decided that this could not be cost-free either to the United States or to its allies in the region, many of which are GCC countries. And so it took increasingly escalatory measures in the Persian Gulf in terms of ships disrupting shipping in the Straits of Hormuz, mining ships, and so forth, and then culminating in the alleged attacks, anyway, on by Iran or Iran-sponsored proxies on the Saudi Aramco Abqaiq facilities, I believe in September of 2019. Why do I recount that history? Because I think it's important to understand that this created a bit of a gestalt shift, I think, certainly in the UAE and possibly even Saudi Arabia, to indicate that being a spoiler in terms of U.S.-Iranian relations was not going to come cost-free. Because they had, as you remember, during the JCPOA negotiations, they felt that they were sidelined and ultimately became spoilers. And they egged on the Trump administration to become increasingly hostile towards Iran. And I think the outcome of these attacks indicated that, number one, that if there is some kind of kinetic conflict between the military conflict between the United States and Iran, or even Israel and Iran, the likely victims, as other speakers have said, are likely to be the UAE and possibly even Saudi Arabia. So I think the notion that there needs to be a way forward that does not involve deepening the hostilities between the United States and Iran, I think has become internalized in the decision-making structures in Abu Dhabi, if not in possibly even Riyadh. Related to that, I think, is the fact that after the Abqaiq attacks, the U.S. essentially did nothing. And so I think the way that was internalized in the GCC countries is that the Carter Doctrine, which essentially imposed a security umbrella on top of in the Persian Gulf, had expired, and that the deterrent structures that the U.S. has in the region, had roughly 65,000 troops in the region between various venues, bases, and then in the GCC countries and also in Iraq and Afghanistan, the deterrent effect had also not worked. So I think there's an indication that there aren't many options available other than thinking about a pathway towards cooperation. There aren't too many options. They can't rely necessarily on the United States. They can't rely on China. GCC countries can't rely on China for their security. They can't rely on Russia. And even the budding relationship between several GCC states and Israel is really shy of a security framework and treaty arrangement.
آنچه در مورد ما میگویند